Hey guys and gals, it's your buddy Drew with Living History's Mysteries and Ferocious Feline Productions. You know, through the centuries, a lot of history's been made. Some of this history is easy to find. The great battles, the great individuals, the characters throughout history. But one thing that stands out that's really hard to find or to prove or disprove is probably one of the greatest mysteries that history left us. Regardless of what country you go to or what point in history that you go, one myth, one legend stands out above the rest. But I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about it. We're going to look at a little bit of the history and the origins of this legend. Check this out. This is good.
The night is still. An owl hoots, a lonely sound. In these dark hours, whispers begin. They tell of creatures of the night, creatures that hunger. Their name hangs in the air, vampires. To understand the vampire, we must go back to the dawn of civilization. The first whispers came from Mesopotamia. Here in the shadows of grand temples lurked the Ekimu and Utuku.
They haunted the living, draining them of life. The Mesopotamians feared these creatures, offered sacrifices to appease them. These were among the earliest attempts to explain the unexplainable.
The whispers echoed through the ages, finding new voices in ancient Greece. Here, amongst the philosophers and the gods, walked the Empusa.
She drank their blood, feasted on their life force. The Greeks saw in these creatures a reflection of their deepest fears. These ancient fears would evolve and transform. They would, in time, give birth to the vampire we know today.
The Tigris and Euphrates rivers snaked through Mesopotamia. They brought life and prosperity, but they also brought darkness. Along their banks, fear took root. The Mesopotamians could not escape the grip of the unknown. From this darkness emerged the first whispers of the vampire myth. They called them Ekimu, restless spirits, unable to find peace. They wandered the world of the living as shadows.
The Ekimu fed on the life force of the living. They brought weakness, disease, and despair. To encounter an Ekimu was to feel the cold breath of the grave.
But the Ekimu were not the only terror. There were also the Utuku. These were vengeful spirits. They returned from the grave with a purpose to right wrongs. They could possess the living, twist their thoughts. The Utuku were a force of nature, a manifestation of the unappeased dead. Ancient Greece, a land of sunlight and olive groves. But beneath this veneer lay a primal fear, a fear of the unknown. For the Greeks, monsters lurked in the shadows. Their myths are filled with creatures of the night. Among these, the Empusa stands out as a terrifying precursor to the modern vampire. The Empusa was a shapeshifter.
She could take on any appearance to lure her prey. Often, she appeared as a beautiful woman.
But her true form was a grotesque mockery of beauty. Her touch brought not love, but death. She would drain her victims of their life force, leaving behind only withered husks. As the whispers of ancient Mesopotamia and Greece faded, a new darkness was brewing. In Eastern Europe, the vampire myth took shape. The Slavic people held a deep belief in the power of the earth. From this fertile ground, the vampire emerged as a creature of both terror and fascination. In the Balkan regions, the vampire went by many names, but none were as feared as the Vrikolakas. This creature craved blood, the essence of life itself. Villages lived in fear, taking elaborate precautions. Graves were dug deep, bodies staked through the heart. The case of Peter Plagojevich cemented the vampire's place in history.
In the early 18th century, I died, or so everyone thought. But shortly after my burial, strange things began to happen. People fell ill and died, whispering of a dark figure.
The villagers exhumed Plagojevich's grave. His body appeared lifelike, a trickle of blood on his lips. Convinced he was a vampire, they drove a stake through his heart. The whispers of vampirism found fertile ground in the 18th century. In Medvedja, Serbia, the legend became reality with Arnold Paula.
I claimed to have encountered a vampire, but when I died, villagers began to fall ill.
The villagers exhumed Paola's body. His body showed little sign of decay. A reddish fluid stained his mouth. Paola was declared a vampire, his body staked and burned. The fear of vampires was woven into society. The Black Death, killing millions, left an indelible mark. People searched for answers, for someone to blame. The vampire became a convenient scapegoat. The plague's symptoms reinforced the belief in vampires. Medical conditions were shrouded in mystery and fear. Diseases like tuberculosis were mistaken for signs of vampirism. Victims fit the profile of those preyed upon by the undead. Even natural decomposition was seen as a sign of vampirism. The dead were not always content to stay dead. The legend of the vampire provided a terrifying answer. The Middle Ages, a time of darkness. The Black Death had swept across Europe. The vampire now stalked the waking world. The church found in the vampire a convenient enemy. Tales of their evil deeds spread like wildfire. Protective rituals became commonplace. Graves were staked, bodies exhumed. The fear of the vampire had become a raging inferno. As the Middle Ages gave way to the Renaissance, the grip of the vampire on the human imagination showed no signs of weakening. In the 15th century, a real-life figure emerged, Vlad the Impaler, or Dracula. Vlad was a prince, a warrior, known for his ruthlessness. He fought to defend his lands against the Ottoman Empire. Impalement became his signature. Whispers of his cruelty spread far and wide. Vlad the Impaler embodied many traits that would later define the literary vampire. The year was 1897. The Victorian era was nearing its end, and, well, a sense of unease hung in the air. The Industrial Revolution had brought progress, but also a lot of uncertainty. The old ways were fading, and in their place, a new world was being born, a world of shadows and whispers. It was in this atmosphere, ripe with anxiety and fascination with the occult, that Bram Stoker unleashed his masterpiece Dracula. Dracula was not the first vampire novel, but it was the novel that would redefine the genre. Stoker drew upon centuries of folklore, on the whispers from ancient Mesopotamia and Greece, on the chilling tales from Eastern Europe, and on the historical figure of Vlad the Impaler. But from these disparate threads, he wove something entirely new. His Dracula was not simply a monster, but a complex and compelling figure. He was an ancient being of immense power, yet also a creature of longing and despair. He was both repulsive and alluring, a figure who embodied the Victorian era's deepest fears and desires. With Dracula, Stoker gave the vampire a name, a face, and a voice that would echo through the ages. From page to screen, the immortal Count. Dracula, once confined to the printed page, did not remain there for long. The 20th century, with its technological advancements and its insatiable appetite for entertainment, provided new avenues for the vampire myth to flourish. The flickering images of early cinema found in Dracula a perfect subject, a creature of darkness that seemed to come alive in the shadows of the silver screen. From the silent terror of F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu to the gothic grandeur of Bela Lugosi's iconic portrayal in Universal's 1931 Dracula, the vampire became a staple of horror cinema. Each adaptation brought something new to the myth, shaping and reshaping the public's perception of these creatures of the night. But the vampire's journey on screen did not end with the classic horror films. As the decades passed, the vampire evolved, reflecting the changing anxieties and fascinations of society. From the Hammer horror films, with their more sensual and violent depictions, to the comedic takes and the teenage vampire heartthrobs of later years, Dracula's legacy continued to inspire and terrify. The modern vampire, between horror and heartthrob. The late 20th and early 21st centuries saw a resurgence of the vampire myth in popular culture. But unlike the vampires of old, these creatures were not always relegated to the shadows. They walked among us, sometimes hiding in plain sight, sometimes embracing their true nature. They were the heroes, the anti-heroes, and the villains of countless books, movies, and television shows. Anne Rice, with her Vampire Chronicles, gave us vampires who were both tortured and seductive, creatures of immense power grappling with their own humanity, or lack thereof. The Buffy the Vampire Slayer universe, spanning television and comics, presented a world where vampires were not just monsters, but metaphors for the challenges and complexities of growing up. And then there was Twilight. Stephenie Meyer's series and the subsequent film adaptations sparked a global phenomenon, turning vampires into romantic heroes, objects of desire rather than fear.
I know what you are.
Say it.
Jonas brother.
That's right. Wait, what?
I know what you are.
Say it. Out loud.
Vampire.
The vampires of Twilight were beautiful, tormented, and ultimately relatable to a generation grappling with their own sense of identity and belonging. The enduring allure of the unknown. From the ancient deserts of Mesopotamia to the bustling cities of the modern world, the vampire has journeyed through time, leaving an indelible mark on our collective imagination. These creatures, born of darkness and fear, have haunted our nightmares and fueled our fantasies for centuries. We have sought to explain them, to rationalize their existence, to find a place for them in a world increasingly governed by science and reason. But perhaps the true power of the vampire lies not in its ability to be explained, but in its enduring mystery. The vampire, with its thirst for blood, its promise of immortality, and its existence on the fringes of life and death, speaks to something deep within the human psyche. It represents our primal fears, our fascination with the unknown, and our own mortality. The vampire is a shapeshifter, both literally and figuratively. It has taken on many forms throughout history, adapting to the anxieties and desires of each era. From the vengeful spirits of ancient myths to the romantic heroes of modern fiction, the vampire has reflected our evolving relationship with the darkness that lies both within and beyond ourselves. Our reflections in the dark. The vampire, for all its monstrous qualities, is ultimately a reflection of ourselves. It embodies our capacity for both good and evil, for love and hate, for life and death. In its thirst for blood, we see our own primal urges, our own hunger for connection, for sustenance, for something that transcends the ordinary. In its immortality, we confront our own mortality, our fear of aging, of decay, of the inevitable end that awaits us all. And in its existence on the fringes of society, we see a reflection of our own desires for acceptance, for belonging, for a place in a world that often feels cold and unforgiving. The vampire myth, then, is not simply a collection of stories, but a mirror to the human soul. It allows us to explore the darkest corners of our own nature, to confront our fears, and to grapple with the big questions of life, death, and what might lie beyond. And as long as these questions continue to haunt us, the vampire will continue to fascinate, to terrify, and to remind us that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones we create ourselves. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the shadows.
Welcome back. You know, it's like I was saying in the beginning. Regardless of what point in history you visit, just about any country, any ethnic group throughout the world, you're going to find myths and legends about the undead. These predate Bram Stoker's novel by hundreds, even thousands of years. Was there some group of ancient beings that started this myth and this legend? Are the stories true? From Greece, from Mesopotamia, from all over Europe and Asia, and through the centuries, even in America. A lot of evidence points towards the existence of these magnificent creatures. A lot of naysayers, a lot of evidence points to the fact they're only myth and legend. Until one actually comes forward.
What are you gonna do? Kill me, drink my blood, all that stuff?
Yes, but you needn't be concerned with that now.
The legend of the vampire will just remain one of those magnificent mysteries that history left behind. That's all we've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this look back into the history and the origins of the vampire. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. God bless you. God love you. We do.
And we'll see you in history.